The Hidden Slotsholmen and the Secret Court Theatre. The Hidden Slotsholmen. Slotsholmen is a fine little artificial island which for centuries has been an important part of the center of art, war, politics and power. Slotsholmen is a historical memorial and a monumental urban space all in one. Not many places in the world allow you to come as close to the institutions of power as here. Slotsholmen is freely accessible and at the same time one of the best secured public areas in Denmark. At Slotsholmen you can see how the very special connection between the royal and the political power we have in Denmark has made its way through buildings and spaces, and in a great deal you cannot see. At Slotsholmen, historic buildings are placed next to state-of-the-art architecture. Slotsholmen is modern working lives during the day and historic darkness at night. But Slotsholmen is also a place of oblivion, of traces of events and stories that live in the walls and in the open spaces, and which no longer can be seen nor noticed. There is a visionary drive through Slotsholmen's history, a cultural imagination that has been created over time by people and institutions. It also applies in the 18th century, where the impressive first Christiansborg Palace was built. The palace itself burned in 1794. The only thing preserved of the palace today is the riding ground behind the Folketing, the Houses of Parliament, and the wings of the buildings that surround it, the riding house, the royal stables, and the court theatre. The Secret Court Theatre. The Court Theatre is Denmark's oldest theatre house. The Court Theatre is mysterious, filled with more than 250 years of historical atmosphere. The Royal Theatre from 1748 was the King's Theatre, but it was still a public theatre. So, like the other absolute kings around Europe, Christian VII needed to have his own more private theatre for himself and for the elite of power. And so, in 1767, the court theatre was built into the wing of the first Christiansborg Palace from the 1730s. It happened above the royal stables. The palace burned down in 1794, but the royal stables and the court theatre were untouched by the flames. The court theatre also escaped the next Christiansborg fire in 1884. However, it had already been closed 3 years before in 1881 as a result of the Ring Theatre in Vienna burning down, with 500 spectators perishing. In 1922, the Court Theatre reopened, and now the Theatre Museum had moved in. Today, every niche in the Court Theatre contains traces of the history of the Court Theatre and of its engagement of the art of theatre with the world outside the theatre. You can see traces of the original Rust Chamber, or take a walk on the stage where Christian VII himself and stars such as Hans Christian Andersen has appeared. The Riding Ground. And now on to Christiansborg Riding Ground behind the Folketing, the Houses of Parliament, one of Denmark's oldest and most beautifully preserved places. A historical yet contemporary oasis in the middle of the bustling metropolis. For almost 300 years, the riding ground has been an exclusive and open public space, a central place for political manifestations and cultural events. Most have left no traces in the present. On the other hand, since 1740, the elegant horses from the royal stables have had their daily exercise on the riding ground. During 1857, a technical miracle appeared on the riding ground. Now, for the first time, the citizens of Copenhagen could see a sample of the white electric light from the carbon lamp. In the same year, the riding ground was the scene of a widely advertised balloon ascension. It awakened the dreams and the urge to travel of the much cholera-afflicted Copenhageners, who, for a few decades still, had to live incarcerated behind the ramparts. The giant balloon eased up under high blue skies and orchestral music with Victor Granberg, the Swedish balloon skipper. As the balloon was at the height of the roof of the Court Theatre, it got stuck. Granberg got out to loosen it, but the balloon got away, and Granberg, astonished, stood back on the roof. Somewhere down in the crowd, a clear Copenhagen voice shouted, "It won't do, Granberg," and the crowd burst into a roaring laugh. The main historical monument of the riding ground is the large equestrian statue from 1928 of Christian IX. It is executed by Anne-Marie Carl Nielsen, married to the composer Carl Nielsen. She was the first woman in the world to make an equestrian statue, one of the most prestigious tasks of the sculpture profession. Today, Christian IX is often wedged in between cars, work sheds, containers, and temporary barriers. In 2013, the riding ground was fenced off due to regulations governing the horse's fold. Thus, the large fountain in the middle of the space, which had been there since 1850, also disappeared. Especially in the summer, the fountain was a break in the middle of a Copenhagen crowded with tourists. Today, visitors can view the riding ground and the royal horses from the balcony and cafe of the Theatre Museum at the Court Theatre. The Court Theatre over time. And now back to the Court Theatre. It has several times been a hothouse for the interaction between the royal, political and cultural powers. During the first years after the opening in 1767, the Court Theatre housed the masquerades, in which the schemes of the political power of the absolute monarchy could be forged. In the early 1800s, it was almost impossible to move upward in society. However, at the Court Theatre, it was possible for the few who, by the way of the arts, such as a very young Hans Christian Andersen, attended classes at the ballet school of the Royal Theatre based here. In the 1840s, Christian VIII and his architect, Jørgen Hansen Koch, modernized the Court Theatre and hired an Italian opera troupe that was in wild contradiction to the local Danish tradition. The Court Theatre was now a public opera house open to everyone if they bought a ticket. And so they did, in the fullest measure. In the 1850s, after the end of the absolute monarchy, for some years Frederick VII and Countess Dana made the Court Theatre into their own cultural free space, in a time when they were fiercely criticized by the elite and exposed to gossip among people in Copenhagen. Today, the Theatre Museum at the Court Theatre is a historical attraction as well as a cultural meeting place, which will be closed from March 2021 until December 2022 due to a long-needed restoration and modernization.